Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating chapter of early Christian history. For centuries, the historical spotlight has pretty much been fixed on Rome. But right now, we're shifting our focus eastward to the Mediterranean. We're going to explore how the ancient Phoenicians became some of the very first Gentiles to fully embrace Christianity. Let's get right into it.
So think about this for a second. While Rome was still actively sacrificing to Jupiter, who had already embraced Christ? The answer might surprise you. Decades before the Roman Empire ever bowed to the cross, the shores of Phoenician Lebanon were already pulsing with this new faith. It wasn't some foreign import brought in centuries later. It was a grassroots movement established right there incredibly early on.
Section 1. The Divine Arrival. Christ on Phoenician Shores.
The Gospel of Matthew actually documents this undeniable geographic connection. Matthew 15:21 tells us straight up, leaving that place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. It was during this very journey deep into Phoenician territory that he met a Canaanite woman, a Syrophoenician, and healed her daughter. This specific moment was a massive catalyst. It literally planted the seeds of the first ever Gentile faith directly into the soil of these ancient cities.
And while he was preaching in Sidon, tradition holds that the Virgin Mary actually waited for him in the Almantara cave in Magdusha. Today, it's known as the Place of the Awaiting, and it is an incredibly sacred spot. In fact, Empress Helena later had a miraculous shrine built right there, cementing it forever as a deeply significant site in early Christian history.
Moving on to Section 2, the Apostolic Foundation. St. Peter built the church here.
When you look at the timeline, it is just incredible. We're talking about a highly organized urban church built within a single generation. Look at this. In 33 AD, Jesus is evangelizing Tyre and Sidon. Fast forward just a bit to 50 AD, and St. Paul is traveling from Rome to Jerusalem and finds a massive, thriving Christian community already established in Tyre. Then, by 80 AD, Pope Clement is recording official apostolic appointments in the region.
During this time, St. Peter himself literally walked this coastline and personally appointed bishops. St. John Mark the Evangelist became the very first bishop of Byblos. A bishop was designated for Beirut, which is modern-day Beirut, and St. Silas was appointed bishop of Batras, or Batroun. We are seeing a highly structured top-level leadership put in place straight from the apostles themselves.
Which brings us to Section 3, the blood of martyrs and Nicaea. Phoenician bishops defined Christianity.
But this faith was absolutely forged in fire. During the brutal Roman persecutions, early Christians here endured unimaginable trials. Take Theodosia of Tyre, for example. She was a resilient, 18-year-old Phoenician girl. Because of her unwavering faith and her outright refusal to bow to the Romans, she was tortured and thrown into the violent waves of the sea. Another young man from Tyre, Ulpianus, faced a horrifyingly similar fate. He was tossed into the sea, sewn inside a raw ox hide, along with a venomous asp. It really shows the intense, severe trials this early church had to survive.
And yet, despite centuries of that kind of horrific persecution, they didn't just survive, they grew. Because of that unbreakable resilience, 11 Phoenician bishops survived to attend the monumental Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, taking on absolute seats of authority at this foundational gathering.
Now, what's really fascinating here is the sheer influence these cities held at the council. Look at the breakdown. Tyre acted as the metropolitan, the lead city. Sidon was instrumental in formulating the Nicene Creed itself. Byblos was actively defining ecclesiastical law, and Berytus focused on establishing orthodoxy. The big takeaway here? Our historical narrative shows this region wasn't just passively receiving Christianity from the West. They were literally sitting at the head of the table, defining the global faith for everyone else.
Section 4. Lighting the Ethiopian Faith. The Epic Detour of Frumentius. This next story is just wild. Around 316 AD, two young brothers from Tyre, Frumentius and Odysseus, were shipwrecked and tragically sold into slavery in Abyssinia. But instead of fading into history, they actually gained the king's favor. They rose the ranks incredibly fast to become trusted royal advisors, and they were even put in charge of educating the young prince Ezana. Eventually, Frumentius traveled to Alexandria, where he was ordained as the very first bishop of Ethiopia, essentially founding one of the oldest continuously Christian states on the planet.
The Ethiopian people so deeply revered him that they gave him the title Abba Salama, which means Father of Peace. Frumentius left behind an eternal legacy, forging an incredibly strong ecclesiastical connection between the Levant and East Africa that remained unbroken for over 1,600 years.
It just goes to show how one single life can literally light a flame for eternity.
And that leads us to Section 5, our unbroken bloodline, the Maronite continuity.
Fast forward through centuries of Islamic conquests, crusader invasions, and constantly shifting empires, and you'll find that the rugged mountains of Lebanon served as an ultimate sanctuary. Historical accounts tell us how the local populations expertly concealed their holy shrines, like that cave of Al-Mantara we talked about earlier, and retreated deep into these totally impenetrable mountain strongholds. By doing this, they perfectly preserved their ancient Syriac and Maronite traditions for generations. The mountains protected their memory, and that memory is still very much alive today.
And to really hammer this home, modern genetic testing has added this absolutely incredible layer to the story. Recent studies brilliantly illustrate that modern Lebanese Christians share roughly 93% of their DNA with those ancient indigenous Canaanite and Phoenician populations. Let that sink in. It is a direct, unbroken biological line connecting right back to the original inhabitants of those coastal cities.
So this hard data really shatters some long-held false narratives. It totally pushes back against the idea that the faith was just imported to the Levant from the West, or that these local populations were basically migrants from Arab tribes in Syria. Instead, the absolute truth we see here is that Phoenician Lebanon is the original indigenous Christian homeland. It has deep, unbroken, and continuous roots that have never been severed.
Which brings us to one final, deeply thought-provoking question to leave you with. If these Phoenician ancestors bled to preserve the true original roots of the faith, how does that reshape our entire understanding of the region's legacy? Will you let the shifting empires of history erase their incredible story? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.